Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CBR MTG. My name is Angus Mackay, and I'm joined here by Philip Nicholson. Hi, Phil.
Hello.
Today, we're going to look at some lovely Grixis draw threes from Sophie Pizzuto and Flash Hulk with Lachlan. So, a couple of old decks, and you, from what I hear, haven't been on the scene for a little while, Phil. But these are some decks that you might be pretty familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, at least the shells are probably going to be very similar. You're just looking to, on on our left here, leverage powerful control elements with a little bit of card advantage here and there before closing out in the late game. And then on the right, obviously, you're looking to combine the cards Flash and Protean Hulk, and then find a pile of cards that usually through a convoluted loop of game actions causes you to win the game.
Yeah, I think Flash Hulk has gotten a lot easier with some new cards, Samwise Gamgee and Cauldron Familiar. Alongside of Viscera Seer is a 4 CMC infinite loop, and something that it seems has caught Lachlan's eye as they've decided to take it onto the battlefield today.
Well, if I know anything about Lachlan, I do know that they enjoy taking game actions.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
Flash Hulk and having Samwise 20 cats definitely seems like it's right up their alley.
Absolutely, and you can see most of the combo is right in Lockie's hand, ready to go. We see the Protein Hulk, thanks to Sophie's Gataxian Probe. We see the Protein Hulk and Titania Brainstorm, Pluto Delta, Spell Seeker, and Viscera Seer. So, I mean, the cat's out of the bag now, so to speak. Cat's not in the picture at the moment, but at least out of the bag because Sophie's shown this Gataxian Probe. She's seen the cards. And now she can kind of work with that information to decide her next few plays.
Yeah, definitely helps a lot knowing that in this kind of control deck, knowing exactly what kind of threats you have to worry about, when you want to be leaving up mana for counter spells,
Yeah.
whether you have them or you're just representing them, having that mana open is pretty meaningful. Obviously, at the moment, Lockie doesn't have the Flash, but does have the Hulk, so you always have to have at least a little bit of worry that it could just get peeled off the top. And obviously, between the Brainstorm and the Spellseeker, there is a pretty decent amount of ways to dig to Flash. And you also obviously, as the the non-combo deck in this situation, while you do need to represent counter spells and other answers, obviously Sophie chose to go for the Delver on turn one rather than representing something like a Spell Pierce, because you do need to actually put out a clock, because if you just wait until turn 20 and let the combo deck kind of just sit there, eventually they'll probably be able to thought seize all the counter spells out of your hand and then still have plenty of juice left to actually go off.
Absolutely. I mean, Sophie does have the benefit, of course, of her own suite of hand disruption. Sophie playing Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Dress in the board as well, and Hymn to Torok as well, which kind of hurts Lachlan in the sense that they can't just hold on for ages. But it will be a matter for Lachlan to just try and find that opening. And it looks like Mystic Sanctuary on Lachlan's side coming in tapped, presumably because the card that is hidden from view, the last card in Lachlan's hand is not that third land, but is desperate to get that Spellseeker off. So we'll see what comes up in the coming turns. Sophie cycling an Oliphant here from the Lord of the Rings set to get a Steam Vents as she starts her new turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to be able to find lands with additional land types, particularly in a format like Highlander, where you can only play a certain number of those those fetch lands and those sort of original dual lands. So having good ways to be able to filter your mana, especially when the land cycle only costs one, so it can fit pretty comfortably into a land slot.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this has certainly grown in popularity since it's come out. I think the first weekend Lord of the Rings was out, there wasn't too many of these land cyclers in play, but people have definitely picked them up and actually just taken lands out of their deck. as you mentioned, just replacing a fetch land with a creature, it's kind of it's huge for these decks as well. You know, it's just more flexibility, even at the cost of coming in pseudo tapped, because you have to tap the mana to start the cycling process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that's really not particularly flashy. Like, obviously, the option to play Oliphant is there, and I believe Sophie also has
The Troll of Kazakh Doom and Lorien Revealed. She's got the whole suite.
Well, I was more thinking about the cheeky Reanimate package.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
That you can use to get them back. So but I mean, it's just not as sort of, I guess, flashy as something like Orcish Bowmasters from the same set that obviously a lot of people very immediately jumped on the hype train for.
Yes, definitely.
But it just sort of helps smooth out your curve and your draws, which helps a lot in any format, but obviously especially a singleton format.
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely, and you mentioned it quite rightly so, that Sophie is playing both Animate Dead and Reanimate in her package, and it seems that they're pretty easy to slot in now that you have these cycling creatures. Like even some of the best combo decks can't go turn 1 Entomb a creature, turn 2 reanimate it. You know, so it's nice to have that package available to you in what is essentially Grixis control.
Yeah, and I think like as a control deck in Highlander, you can also play a bit of a mid-range game, and there's always sort of an argument as a mid-range deck that sometimes Reanimate is sort of just okay.
Yeah.
Like reanimating some of your 2 and 3 drop creatures, it doesn't cost you that much life.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty high tempo play if you can reanimate, leaving open a counter spell or removing your own opponent's creature on turn 3 or something. Then it can be pretty potent.
Absolutely, and we see the Sorin's Ransom in Sophie's hand back to the game as a way to put creatures in the graveyard as well. Theoretically, I mean, she's playing Ledger Shredder and DRC, a Dragon's Rage Channeler as well, which both incidentally put cards in the graveyard. So it's not even necessarily like a sub theme. It's just like there's these pieces that have come together that provide this incidental graveyard filling, and so you may as well play Reanimate and Animate Dead.
Yeah, I believe we also see a Tasiga the Golden Fang in Sophie's hand. So that Sorin's Ransom should help to hopefully deploy that card fairly soon.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's also a Hymn to Torok is the last card.
Yeah, the classic Wolves Howling at the Moon, one of my favorite
That
arts.
is definitely the best Hymn to Torok card.
Absolutely.
I will not accept any comments on this fact.
And you won't hear them from me. I think that's definitely the best.
I believe it was slightly unfortunate that Sophie did choose to get the Steam Vents with that Oliphant.
Yes, yeah.
Did lock herself out of the Hymn. I can't quite tell what that 4th land is.
Yeah, a little bit obscured by the glare. I think because Sophie's pretty heavily built around Mystic Sanctuary, now coming down to 0 points. So in her mind, I mean, she cycled the Oliphant before. It's a Xander's Lounge by the looks of it. It's the Grixis Triome from Sophie's side, but she's really incentivized to make sure that all of her cards are islands, so that the Mystic Sanctuary is turned on quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously, she just got very unlucky with the flip of the Delver revealing a Hymn to Torok after you've already done the cycling.
Sure. I mean, it's not necessarily the end of the world. There are... Hymn to Torok is obviously a pretty good card against combo, but
Especially if it's on curve.
Loki does potentially have ways, like you can respond with a Brainstorm to tuck important pieces on top. Obviously, it's not necessarily something Lucky would like to have cast against them.
Yeah.
But it's
not game over.
It's not, no.
Yeah. So that's lucky that she didn't end up breaking her back for it. We see the Sorin's Ransom being cast. For anyone who doesn't know, it's 3 mana instant. Dimir colors. You reveal to your opponent 4 cards from the top of your library. You don't get to see them. Your opponent splits them into 2 piles. You get to choose 1 pile to go into your hand and 1 pile to go into your graveyard. And the ring tempts you.
That's a lot of words to say you pay 3 mana to draw 2 cards.
Yeah, basically. So a little bit cheaper than Fact or Fiction, which did see some play when it was a little bit of a while ago. So this, you could consider this sort of the spiritual successor to Kess Pile, which in Highlander days of yore was really heavily played. It was kind of the menace of the format, just a sort of Grixis control, but utilizing Kess Dissident Mage to recoup some value from your graveyard. So
I don't think they were playing Recoup. I think that's a little bit too deep.
It would be.
And it has flashback anyway. It doesn't need Tessa's help.
Oh, now you're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. Learned something new about this recoup.
But yeah, I mean, Grixis has just for quite a while in Highlander been pretty strong. It just has a pretty reasonable critical mass of efficient answers, card draw, and threats that mean even if with a new set, like we see the channeler there, occasionally a new card pops up that's an easy slot into the deck.
Yeah.
But it's not really shaking up the deck. The deck still does the same thing. It just does it a little bit better than it did previously. But
for mid-range decks or decks that are just looking for cards that are good in a vacuum, making your deck slightly better each time, actually fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lockie very, very politely showing the camera the cards that they're considering with their Limdol's Vault. Recently depointed instant speed, kind of tutor, doesn't draw you a card. Look at top 5 cards of your library. You can put them to the side and pay a life and try again. Pretty fine at 0 points. It was 1 point for a really long time, and I don't think it saw nearly 0 play. And I think now it's getting its rightful nearly 0 play, but also 0 points. So
yeah, you have to be very dedicated to some kind of combo to justify playing Lindell's Vault, especially since it doesn't draw you a card, so it is inherently that card disadvantage, potential life loss, which can really matter. A lot of the time as a combo deck, you are on some kind of race against the clock to get your combo off before you are attacked to death by whatever your opponent's threats might be.
And in this case, we've seen that Limdol's Vault's taken, I think, 3 or 4 damage already, and this Delver of Secrets, unfortunately not flipped, but is a 3/2 Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, we're not seeing the beautiful backside of the card, but it is still getting in there for a Lightning Bolt every time.
Yeah, absolutely, and a Lightning Bolt might be all that Sophie needs now that Lockie's looking at the 4th pile, and looks like they've found it. I think maybe Limdol's Vault probably better suited to where you're looking. If you're looking for one card, it's pretty bad.
Because you're often going to lose a disgusting amount of life.
Yes, exactly. Just trying to find one, and then if the pile is bad, but it has the one card that you need, like maybe that's fine because you just needed that one card, and it shuffles your library anyway. Like this Merchant Scroll, I think that Lockie was thumbing to the front.
I mean, in this situation, finding Merchant Scroll, even though it isn't the card Flash, it's good enough because Lockie does have 4 mana next turn to potentially scroll plus cast the Flash. So that is obviously pretty good. But, I mean, obviously if Sophie has any sort of reasonable interaction or rips a Lightning Bolt or sends off that Home to Torak and just gets lucky, because even with a Brainstorm to protect pieces, you can really only protect one piece on top, so you have to keep sort of the Scroll or the Hulk ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the 1-2 punch combo here. Maybe even this is at Sophie's end step, so this might be... Sophie might have been a little bit greedy here. I'm not sure if we have any extra land slots open. No, we don't. We're fully tapped out. This is Lockie's opening. They've just finished resolving their Limdol's Vault and is now going for the Brainstorm. So it does help you a little bit more to have that card draw after the Limdol's Vault. But we'll see here. This is Lockie's opening. They're down to 5 life. I don't think anything is going to happen after this. So, I mean, fingers crossed. Hopefully we can see a Flash Hulk combo today.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Flash, in order to work as the card was intended, has to be an instant,
Yep.
which means that unless you've picked a particularly weird pile of creatures and chosen to make yourself have to go off at sorcery speed for some reason, you can win at any point, which does make it pretty difficult to navigate sometimes as that control player.
That's a great point that I didn't consider, is that you don't actually have to do it at sorcery speed. You can do it whenever you want.
Yeah, a lot of the time, as the control player, you might want to tap out at the end of your opponent's turn to cast some kind of big card draw effect.
Yeah.
And if they can just win the game in response to that while you're tapped out, it's pretty bad for you.
Yeah, especially for players who don't necessarily know how Flash Hulk works. I mean, the Gitaxian Probe gave it all away, but I mean, we do see the Viserys here, which doesn't see too much play outside of Flash Hulk, but you might be able to like hide some of that information and maybe convince your opponent you're playing at sorcery speed, and then they, you know, as you said, they tap 4 mana for something, a memory deluge, and suddenly it's lights out for them. So I can see that because of the way that Lockie's cards are tapped, they must have drawn the Limdol's Vault off the top, and was actually doing Limdol's Vault stuff in their main phase while the stack was empty, because Sophie was tapped out. And
I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
That turn, yes.
So that would have made it really difficult for Lockie to evaluate how much life they were allowed to lose, because, as you said, they went to 5, which is about as low as you can go, because a bolt, I mean, at 6, a bolt and a Delver hit does do it.
Yeah, I mean, and ideally with that Lindell's Vault as well, I imagine Lockie wanted to keep that polluted Delta functional, which
Yes.
at 4 life it no longer would be. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly when you consider the usage of the Brainstorm. Obviously, if you want to sort of, I guess, threaten that you can use Brainstorm to protect cards from
Yeah.
him to Turok,
Yeah.
but you would also potentially like to be able to just shuffle away cards that aren't necessarily useful to you right now.
Yeah, super. I mean, that's really interesting that you say that, because Lockie had to make all those decisions during their turn, while they knew that Sophie did have the Hymn to Torok. So if Sophie punches off the Hymn to Torok, both of them are making a gamble as to whether or not Sophie would play the Hymn to Torok, because
Yeah, I mean, I think the safest thing to do as Lockie is to put the Hulk itself on top.
Yep.
You do have a bit of redundancy between Spellseeker and Merchant Scroll in terms of ways to find Flash.
Yeah.
Whereas, actually, there was a Summoner's Pact as well.
Yeah. Okay.
In the pile somewhere. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a pretty interesting.
Well, thought process to have to do it without, like, one of the only benefits of Limdol's Vault is that it's instant speed, so you can at least get the most amount of information from your opponent before you punch it off. But Lockie likes playing on hard mode, I see.
Maybe was just hoping that when combined with the Brainstorm would find I don't know the exact list, but would find something that would have allowed them to go off then and there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, potentially. We'll see. It looks like Lockie's just scooping it up, seeing the top 3 cards. I think because I mean they saw the miscalc from Sophie on the table, hands up. It was really great commentary position for us to be in, where both players knew exactly what the other players are playing.
It does help a lot.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, obviously with that miscalculation represented, Lockie can no longer go for that Merchant Scroll for Flash play.
Yeah.
Because you get miscalculated and you no longer have the mana to win the game.
Yeah, a very unfortunate series of events, and definitely huge, in a huge part due to the amount of information that was given to Sophie very early on in the game. So see our players going to sideboarding now. Sophie's bringing in Submerge, a couple of blasts. I think the Duress as well came in, and I think Sophie may have asked Lockie. some tips, which admirable for sure.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
It doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. The amount of times where I've looked in my opponent's eyes and said, like, "Do you have a counter spell?" when I'm just before I'm going off. Sometimes you can tell, but still trying to decide whether or not that's like a dodgy thing to do. But you can always ask.
Yeah, I mean,
Your opponent has always the option to say no.
There's definitely some different schools of thought as to how much sort of that, I guess, poker mentality should bleed into Magic. Sort of, I guess, trying to mind games your opponent.
I think it's just funny because it can kind of go both ways anyway.
Yeah.
You know, like someone who doesn't know that you're you're Hollywooding them, as it's sometimes called. If they don't know that you're Hollywooding them, then you might be able to get them. But if they are giving out the wrong signals by accident because they extra don't know that you're Hollywooding them, you end up screwing yourself over as well. So I think
absolutely.
There's a little bit of to and fro there for sure. See what Lockie's citing in here. I see a Sylvan Library. Thank you, Lockie. Veil of Summer, Jace, Flusterstorm, Carpet of Flowers, Secret last card.
Yeah, I mean...
Seems like a great set to bring in.
Yeah, sort of, I guess, your classic sort of anti-blue suite. I guess I don't know exactly about the Jace Fringe Prodigy. I'm sure that there's a reason that it's in the sideboard and then it comes in this matchup. I guess it's just not quite as obvious as something like Carpet of Flowers.
Which is kind of interesting because I side out Jace Fringe Prodigy if I'm ever versing a control deck, because it's so easy to kill.
Sure.
You know, it's like a lightning bolt. It's a lightning rod for the lightning bolt. But it's pretty easy to kill. But maybe Lockie's just thinking maybe I can sneak it in. Maybe it's like not conspicuous or whatever. Like maybe Sophie doesn't see it as a threat, and then you can flip it quickly.
It is definitely pretty easy to flip in this kind of deck, and if you do so, obviously that gives you a second shot potentially at something like Flash if your opponent does counter it, which can be pretty nice.
Yeah, nice.
And I guess there also just might be some kind of thought process, either that the control deck may take out some of those sort of smaller pieces of removal, like the lightning bolts and the fatal pushes, because they don't really have that many targets. I think we did see Viscera get fatal pushed in game one.
Yeah.
But
you're not really playing Viscera out that. Like,
no.
You're not very happy about it. You know,
No.
you're playing it because you have mana available.
Or I guess the other thought might be that if your opponent is burning something like that on Jace Fringe Prodigy, you know, they don't have it for your Viscera when you do try and go off.
Okay.
So I guess either of those schools of thought could lead you to bringing in that Jace Fringe Prodigy.
I see it. It's interesting on Sophie's side, I saw the Unlicensed Hearse as one of the cards that come in as well. Relatively new card, just a vehicle that taps to exile 2 cards from a graveyard, and then the vehicle becomes quite large depending on how many cards you've exiled throughout the game. A little bit worse than, say, like a Tormoise Crypt effect, I suppose, because I guess you get the choice, so it's fine, but not being able to like pop it just to get everything might be a disadvantage. So
yeah, I mean, with something like that, if it's only hitting a few cards, if you don't get it out early, it may not be sort of the slam dunk hate piece that you want.
Yeah,
but it does also potentially represent a clock, which as I kind of mentioned in game one, that is something really important for this sort of deck to present to the Flashhawk deck.
Yes.
You know, if you can put a threat out sort of as quickly as possible, and then kind of just want to delay your opponent from going off. Yeah, it's kind of what we saw in game one was the Delver came out, and then also if you really needed to do was have that miscalculation to delay lock you going off by a turn or two. You know, you're not looking to lock your opponent out of the game necessarily.
Yeah,
you're just kind of looking to put enough roadblocks in their path that your creatures can crack in for lethal.
Yeah, it's an interesting game style because sometimes you are on the back foot in game 2 and you do have to just side in every piece of hate that you have, and your only goal is to stop your opponent from comboing off. but sometimes, I mean, as you said, if you can slam an early Delver or a DRC, or maybe you can get a Tassica under there, you can represent a clock, and then your hate can be a little softer. You know, you don't have to try as hard to lock down the graveyard, because you're only going to have to be locked down for as long as you're not attacking. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we see Dragon's Rage Channeler doing what Dragon's Rage Channeler does best, which is enable a Surveil trigger on turn 1. Coming back to the games, Loki has started off with a Thought Seize, which promptly took the red Elemental Blast. And kind of interesting, the Urza's Bauble getting the Surveil trigger, and then also activating the Urza's Bauble to see the Profane Tutor in Loki's hand. I've heard Sophie mention this before, that the Urza's Bauble, you actually just randomly get this huge advantage from knowing even one card.
Yep,
you know, like we saw definitely. The power of Gitaxian Probe in game 1. And we're not going to see it with Urza's Bauble in this game because the Profane Tutor is out and ready to go. But if Sophie saw like a Flash, or if she saw a Hulk, then she's suddenly like, oh shit, I have to hold up mana for the rest of the game or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a very good reason that Wizards of the Coast hit Gitaxian Probe with the Banhammer.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Information is really, really, really valuable in Magic the Gathering. And even when it is just sort of one card, sometimes that does really mean quite a lot. Particularly I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily as relevant here, but sometimes it can give you information about even just the deck that your opponent's playing. But
it's interesting that we don't see Peak more. It's just, I guess it's just that the free, because it's instant speed as well, I think. But Peak being just one mana, it's Gitaxian Probe, but you have to pay mana for it. But I think you're just like never, ever paying mana for Gitaxian Probe, which is probably what pushes it over the edge, that it becomes... I guess actually it's also like any deck can play Gitaxian Probe, which is probably what tips it over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also, like, not having to pay mana for the probe is pretty huge. Obviously, you have that option if your life total is pressured, but the fact that you don't have to is really, really important.
Huge, yeah, absolutely huge. So we see the duress from Sophie's side, not drawing a card unlike Peak, but it does get to take a non-creature, non-land card, this time choosing Worldly Tutor, one of the recently depointed top deck tutors on Loki's side. And Loki follows up with a Sylvan Library, hoping to recoup some of that card loss. But Sylvan Library's really good in the early game, and this is almost as early game as you can get. But life total's already at 13. They're about to take another 3, so you can't snap draw 3 cards like you normally would. You know?
You definitely can't do the full baller move of
take 8.
Well, I've always been a big fan of just put the top 3 cards of your library into your hand face down, adjust your life total, and then look at what they are.
Yeah, of course, because then you get more.
You get more cards
later.
Yeah,
exactly. You get more cards.
But I mean, as we can see here, those pieces of hand disruption have really done a lot of damage to Loki's game plan. I mean,
this is terrible for Loki. Yeah.
I mean, they've got the Profane Tutor on suspend, and they've got that Sylvan Library.
Yeah.
But they really don't have very much time left until this slightly too much rage of dragons is channeled at their face.
Yeah. There's a lot of dragon's rage being channeled here right now, and we see the 1-2 punch that we mentioned in game 1 of cycling a cycling creature and reanimating it. So Troll of Khazad-dûm, a 6 mana 6/4 with double menace. So even 2 creatures can't block it. It has to be 3 creatures, and that is a real formidable opponent for Loki to verse, because 6 + 3, as we all know, is 9, and that only leaves 1 life point for playing around with in this turn. So, I mean, Sophie's playing the control game, but this game is almost over.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the nature of how efficient some threats are in Modern Magic, but it's also just the nature of the singleton format that sometimes you just play I mean, other than a singular days, this has barely even been a blue deck. It's just been sort of a red-black go at face deck.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, red black mid-range, or I think it's called BR Eclipse at the moment, which is as good Highlander deck names, completely ludicrous. Based on the red-white deck that's called Moonshine, because blue red was called Blue Moon, and then the white.
We've
red
gone
white,
too
we've
deep.
gone too deep.
Yeah.
Anyway, BR Eclipse has shown its strength in this format as well, without the blue, just playing red and black and doing stuff like this, where you're inquisitioning, you're Dragon's Rage channeling. This is terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it can also make it really difficult to sideboard for. I mean, this with the Inquisition hitting that flash, this game is almost certainly over. But I mean, imagine a game state here where Lockie's sitting on a fistful of anti-blue hate.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that hand disruption really shining as like the other avenue that you can take as a blue deck. Many blue decks like to hold up their mana until the end of their opponent's turn, just with cantrips and instant speed removal. But if you decide to lean into the dark side a little bit, this suite of efficient threats and hand disruption can kind of turn your opponent on their side. And as it's done with Lockie in a pretty clean 2-0 for Sophie.
Yeah, definitely backing up those really cheap threats in the Delver into Exact Elaboration in Game 1, and the Dragon Rage Channeler in Game 2, and then backing it up with a bit of disruption, was able to get lethal through before Lockie was able to assemble their Flash Hulk combo.
Yeah, really dancing on the edge of tempo and mid-range, where you're just protecting the queen, which is what Sophie did on those 2 games, but some games you'll just slam a Sheoldred on turn 4 and not have done anything before then. So good on her. All right, well, congratulations to Sophie on that clean win. Commiserations to Lockie on that unclean 0-2. Otherwise, thank you everyone for listening and watching. We will continue to post Highlander videos as time goes on, as Phil and I go through the archives, and keep an eye out for future videos. But thanks, Phil, for joining us.
No problem. Happy to help.
And we'll see you next time.